Dinner cost me $247. I remember the exact number because I stood outside the restaurant for a minute before walking in, looking at the menu posted in the window, doing the math in my head. It was a Wednesday night in November, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and my mother had picked the place. She said it was her favorite. I had never been. I drove 40 minutes to get there. I am 29 years old. I work as an office coordinator at an orthodontic practice outside Columbus, Ohio. I make $52,000 a year, which sounds like enough until he starts subtracting things. Rent, utilities, groceries, gas, car insurance, student loans. And then for the last 3 years, one more line item that I added quietly and never talked about, $850 a month sent to my parents' landlord directly, every first of the month, like clockwork. My parents do not own their home. They rent a house in the neighborhood I grew up in. After my father's hours got cut at the plant and my mother's knee made it hard for her to stay on her feet at work, things got tight for them. I was the youngest of 3 children and the only one who lived within driving distance. So when my mother called me one evening in the spring of 2022 and said they were going to be short on rent, I told her not to worry. I should have let myself think about what I was agreeing to before I said it. I want to be clear about something. I did not help them because they asked me to. I helped them because I could not stand the idea of my parents losing their home. That is a different thing. It matters that it is a different thing. My older brother, who I will call by his role because that is what he was to me, lived in Denver with his girlfriend. He called our parents on holidays and birthdays and sent gift cards at Christmas. He made more money than I did. He had fewer expenses than I did, no student loans, no family nearby pulling at his sleeve. When I mentioned once, carefully, that I had been helping with rent, he said that was really good of me. That was the end of the conversation. My sister lived 40 minutes in the other direction. She had 2 kids, a house she owned, and a husband who worked in insurance. She was not poor. She was also not contributing anything to her parents' situation. She knew I was helping. She said once that it was easier for me because I did not have kids yet. I thought about that sentence for a long time afterward. The dinner on that Wednesday night was supposed to be a birthday celebration. Mine. My mother had suggested it, said she wanted to take me somewhere nice. I told her that was sweet and I looked forward to it. I did not ask who was paying. I should have, but I did not because it was my birthday dinner and I assumed. My brother flew in for it. That surprised me. I thought it meant something. I drove to the restaurant feeling, for the first time in a while, like maybe things were okay. Like maybe the last 3 years of quiet giving had built something between us that I had not been able to see. I was wrong about that. The table was me, my parents, my brother, my sister, and my brother-in-law. 6 people. The restaurant was nice. White tablecloths, bread that came in a basket, the kind of place where the waiter tells you his name and means it. The first hour was fine. We ordered. We talked about my brother's new apartment in Denver, which apparently had exposed brick and a rooftop. My sister's older kid had just made the travel soccer team. My father told a story about something that happened at his buddy's garage. I drank half a glass of wine and started to relax. I do not know exactly when the tone shifted. I think it happened gradually. The way the temperature drops before a storm. You do not notice it until you realize you are cold. My brother asked me how work was going. I said it was fine, steady, that I liked the people I worked with. He nodded and said that was good. Then he said in a tone that I can only describe as gentle and devastating at the same time. You've been there, 4 years now? Are you looking to move up at all? I said I was comfortable where I was for now. My mother said without looking up from her plate, comfortable is not a career plan. The table did not go quiet, that was the thing. No one paused. No one looked at her and then at me to check how I had taken it. The conversation just kept moving, like she had said something unremarkable. My father said I had always been the type to take the easy road. He said it like it was a personality trait. Neutral, observational, like he was describing my eye color. My sister laughed a little, not cruelly. She laughed. Like it was funny. I set my fork down. I picked up my wine glass. I did not say anything. My brother said, still in that measured, older sibling voice, I just think you have more potential than you're using. We all think that. We say it because we care. I thought about the $850. I thought about the 37 months of payments. I thought about the afternoon I called the landlord directly, so the money would go straight to him, so my parents would not have to feel embarrassed handing it over themselves. I thought about how I had never once brought it up at a dinner table. I said, I appreciate that. My mother raised her glass then. She looked at my brother first, then my sister, then my father, and she smiled the way she smiles when she is performing happiness for an audience. She said, to my youngest, still figuring it out, but we love her anyway. They clinked glasses. I watched them do it. All four of them reaching across the bread basket, touching the rims of their glasses together over the middle of the table, smiling. My brother-in-law joined in because that is what you do when a toast is made. No one looked at me. I thought very clearly I paid for this dinner. I did not say that. I picked up my own glass and I smiled and I said thank you, and I put the glass down and I cut a piece of my chicken and I chewed it and I swallowed. But something happened inside me during that toast. Something I do not have a clean word for. It was not anger exactly. It was more like a door closing, quietly, without drama, just the soft click of a latch. After dessert, a chocolate torte my mother had prearranged with the kitchen, because she knew I liked chocolate, which made the whole night more complicated. The check came. My father looked at it. My mother looked at her purse. My brother made a show of reaching for his wallet and then said, Hey, since you're the birthday girl, maybe we cover our own and call it even? Like this was generous. I paid for the whole table. $247 plus tip. I put my card down before anyone could make it awkward. On the drive home, I did not cry. I turned the radio off and drove in silence on the highway and thought about nothing in particular. I got home at 10:15. I fed my cat. I sat on my couch. Then I opened my laptop and I looked at my bank account and I thought about the math. $52,000 a year. After taxes and my 401k contribution, I took home around $3,400 a month. My rent was $950. My car payment was $280. Insurance, utilities, groceries, loans. I had been living on a tight budget for 3 years. Not because I was reckless, but because I had made a choice and I had kept making it every month without reconsidering it. I pulled up the spreadsheet I kept for my budget. I looked at the line that said family rent support and the number next to it. I thought about my mother's voice. Still figuring it out, but we love her anyway. I thought about my brother reaching for his wallet. I thought about my sister laughing. I closed the laptop about my sister laughing. I closed the laptop. I went to bed, and before I turned the light off, I made a decision. I did not write it down. I did not tell anyone. I just made it. The way you make a decision when you have been thinking about it for a long time without knowing you were thinking about it for a long time without knowing you were thinking about it. The decision was this. December would be the last month. I sent the payment on December 1st, same as always. $850 to the landlord, same account, same memo line. I did it automatically, without feeling anything in particular. Like turning off a light in a room you are leaving. I did not tell my parents. I did not give a warning. I did not write a letter or make a call or set up a meeting to explain my reasoning. I had spent 3 years explaining myself to people who did not ask how I was doing, and I was finished with that. I want to be honest about something here. There was a part of me that waited for one of them to reach out after the dinner. Not to apologize exactly. I am not naive, but to check in. To say, hey, you seemed quiet on the drive out. Are you doing okay? Something small. Something that cost nothing. Nobody called. Not that night. Not the next day. Not that week. My birthday was on a Thursday. By Saturday, silence. What I did instead of waiting was this. I started thinking about what I actually wanted my life to look like. I had not done that in a while. For 3 years, I had been building around a constraint, and now the constraint was lifting, and I had $850 a month back, and I did not know what to do with the space. I started by paying off a credit card I had been carrying a balance on. The feeling of doing that was so disproportionately good that I sat with it for a moment, genuinely surprised at myself. Then I started looking at apartments. Not because I needed to move, but because I had never looked at apartments for myself before. I had always found the cheapest thing available and called it fine. I started looking at places with in-unit laundry, with a second bedroom I could use as an office, with natural light. I was not doing anything dramatic. I was just starting to imagine that I deserved ordinary things. January came and went. I did not send the payment. My landlord would have noticed on January 2nd when it did not arrive. He would have contacted my parents. My parents would have understood what had happened. On January 9th, my mother called me. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the voicemail that evening, standing in my kitchen making dinner. She said she just wanted to catch up. No mention of rent. Her voice careful and pleasant. I thought about calling back. I did not. On January 14th, my father called. I let that go to voicemail too. He said there might have been a mix-up with a payment and could I call him when I had a chance. I did not call. I want to say something about that silence because I think people assume it must have felt powerful or satisfying or like revenge. It did not feel like any of those things. It felt like standing very still in a room while everything rearranged itself around you. Not triumphant, just necessary. On January 19th, my sister texted me. She said, "Mom and Dad are trying to reach you. Is everything okay?" I read it. I did not respond. On January 23rd, my brother called from Denver. I knew because his name came up on my screen, and I looked at it for the length of 2 rings and put the phone face down. By the end of January, between the 4 of them, I had received 61 calls and texts. I counted because I was curious. February was different. On February 3rd, my mother called 4 times in one day. In the last voicemail she left, her voice was different. Thin. She said they had received a notice. She said she did not understand what was happening. She said, "Please, just call us back." I sat with that voicemail for a long time. I am not going to pretend it did not affect me because it did. She is my mother. That is not something you can just switch off. But I also thought about this. In 37 months, she had never once called to ask how I was doing with the payments. Never asked if it was hard. Never said, "I see what you are sacrificing and I want you to know I notice." She called me when the money stopped. Not before. That told me something I had been trying not to know. On February 11th, my sister showed up at my apartment. I opened the door because I did not know it was her until I saw her through the peephole, and by then it felt stranger to not open it than to open it. She came in and sat on my couch and said, "You need to explain what is happening." I said I stopped sending money. She said, "Why would you do that without telling anyone?" I said because I did not want to have a conversation about it. She said Mom and Dad could lose the house. I said they rent. She said, "You know what I mean." I said, "Yes, I do." And then I said something I had been sitting on for a long time. I said, "You have owned your house for 4 years. You have a dual income. You have known for 3 years that I was covering their rent on a coordinator's salary. In 37 months, you never once offered to split it with me. Not once. I never asked. I never made you feel bad about it. But I need you to understand that I noticed." She did not say anything for a moment. I said, "I am not angry. I am just done." She left about 20 minutes later. She was not cruel about it. She was not apologetic either. She was somewhere in the middle, which is probably the most accurate version of who she has always been. After she left, I called my cat over and sat with him on the couch for a while. Outside, it was gray and cold the way Ohio is in February, and I had a small lamp on and it was quiet. Before I tell you what happened next, before I get to the part where everything finally broke open, I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? Where are you watching this? I ask because this kind of story lands differently depending on where you are in your own life when you hear it. Some of you are in the middle of something like this. Some of you are on the other side. I see you either way. By the end of February, my parents had received a formal notice that they were behind on rent. I know this because my brother called me from Denver and this time I picked up. I picked up because I was curious and because I had been sitting with my own silence long enough that I wanted to hear what someone else would say. He said, "I need you to tell me what is going on." I said, "I stopped paying their rent." He said, "You can't just do that." I said, "I did it for 37 months. I can stop doing it." There was a pause on the line and then he said, "They're going to get evicted." I said, "Then you should help them." Another pause. Longer, he said. I don't know their situation like you do. I said, no, you don't. Because you've not been here. I said it without heat, just as a statement of fact. And I think that was what made him go quiet. He had expected me to be upset. He had expected to manage my emotions, and there were no emotions to manage. And he did not know what to do with that. He said he would figure something out. I said, okay. We hung up. Here is what I want you to understand about the 30 days that followed. I was not waiting for an apology. I had let go of that. What I was doing instead was building something. I signed up for a certification program in healthcare administration that I'd been looking at for 2 years. I put a deposit down on a new apartment. In-unit laundry, east-facing windows, a second room I immediately turned into an office with a desk and a lamp and a small plant. I started a savings account I labeled, with total sincerity, mine. I was not building toward revenge. I was building toward myself. The difference matters. 31 days after my brother and I spoke, my mother called me one last time. I picked up. She sounded exhausted. Not angry. Exhausted in the way people get when they have been fighting something for a long time and have run out of the energy to keep pretending. She said that they had received a final notice. She said my brother had sent some money, but it was not enough. She said she did not understand how things had gotten to this point. I said, Mom, I sent $850 every month for over 3 years. That's more than $37,000. She was quiet. I said, I never asked you to thank me, but at my birthday dinner, you toasted to me, still figuring it out. She said, we were just joking around. I said, I know. And then I said the thing I'd been carrying for months. I said it quietly, without drama, because it did not need drama. I said, when the money was coming, you called me the responsible one. When I kept the lights on and the rent paid and never made a scene about it, that was expected. The second it stopped, you called 61 times in 1 month, I counted. I just need you to sit with that for a minute because I have. She did not respond right away. When she did, it was to say she did not know I had been struggling. I said, I wasn't struggling. I was choosing. There's a difference. We said goodbye. It was not dramatic. It was just a door closing, the same door I had heard click shut at that restaurant back in November. This time I was the one walking through it. My parents found a smaller place, a one-bedroom apartment, with help from my brother who finally engaged in the way he should have years ago. I do not know all the details. I did not ask. My sister and I have not talked much. We text occasionally. I think we are both still figuring out who we are to each other, now that I am not playing a particular role. My brother and I have spoken twice. He is not a bad person. None of them are bad people. I have thought about that a lot. The way you can love someone and still be careless with them. The way a family can run on one person's sacrifice without ever naming it as a sacrifice. It does not require malice. It just requires everyone to agree not to live too closely. I am in my new apartment now. The windows face east, which means in the morning when I make coffee, the kitchen fills up with light and I stand there for an extra minute sometimes and let it happen. My cat has claimed a chair by the window as his, and I have made my peace with that. I finished the first course in my certification program last month. I have 2 more to go. I do not send money to anyone but myself anymore. I did not become a different person through any of this. I do not think that is how it works. I think I just started being the person I already was, without the weight of something that was never mine to carry. It is quieter than I expected. Not empty, just quiet. The last thing I want to say is this. There is a particular kind of invisible labor that some people do inside their families. It does not get celebrated because it never gets named. It just gets expected, and then assumed, and then depended on, and somewhere in that process, the person doing it stops being a person and starts being a function. A solution to a problem. An answer to a question no one admits they are asking. I was that for a long time. I am not anymore. And the thing that surprised me most was not that they panicked when it stopped. I expected that. What surprised me was how little the panic changed anything in me, how settled I felt. How, when my mother called those final times, I did not feel guilt the way I thought I would. I felt something closer to clarity, like I had finally gotten the answer to a question I had been afraid to ask. If you are watching this and you recognize something in it, not the specific details, but the shape of it, the way a family can make you feel like you are the one failing while you are the one holding everything up, I just want you to know that the shape of it is real. You are not dramatic. You are not ungrateful. You are allowed to count what you have given and decide that the math does not work anymore. That is not hardness. That is just math. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this ended. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet way you think about things when the noise finally stops and you have enough distance to see the shape of what happened. The thing about what my family did, what my mother and father and brother and sister all did together without seeming to notice they were doing it, is that none of it was a single event. It was a pattern, 37 months of a pattern. They needed something and I gave it, and because I gave it without complaint, they came to believe it cost me nothing. That is how invisible labor works. The better you are at carrying something, the more people forget you are carrying it at all. I do not think they are bad people. I have said that before and I mean it. But I also think that decency without attention is not enough. You can love someone and still be careless with them. You can sit at a dinner table with a person every few months, clink your glass over their head, and have no real idea what their life actually looks like. That is a failure of attention. And attention is something you choose. Every day, you choose what you look at and what you decide not to see. I chose for a long time not to look at what the arrangement was costing me. That was my part in it. I do not say that to be hard on myself. I say it because I think honesty about your own role in a situation is the only thing that actually lets you change it. I could have said something in month 3. I said nothing until month 37. That silence was mine. I own it. What I learned slowly is that there is a version of generosity that comes from strength and a version that comes from fear. The fear version looks identical from the outside. You give the same amount, you show up the same way. But inside, the fear version is about not wanting to see what happens if you stop. Not wanting to find out what you are worth to people when you are not being useful to them. I found out. It was not easy information to receive, but it was true, and true is what I needed. The certification I am working toward now, the apartment with the east-facing windows, the savings account I labeled with a word I had never applied to myself before. Those things are not a happy ending. They are just a beginning that I built from honest materials. I knew what I had. I knew what it cost. I decided to spend it differently. My mother called me the responsible one for years. She meant it as a compliment. I think what she was actually describing was my usefulness. Those are not the same thing, and somewhere in me, I always knew that, and I kept showing up anyway because I thought that was what love required. It does not. Love requires attention. It requires someone asking how you are doing and meaning it. It requires noticing when a person is carrying something and offering to help before they drop it. I am not owed that. Nobody is owed that. But you are allowed to stop carrying things for people who never once lived up to see the weight. That is not a lesson I read somewhere. That is something I learned at a dinner table in November, holding a glass I did not raise, listening to a toast made in my name that had nothing to do with me. I am still figuring it out. But I am figuring it out for myself now. And that, it turns out, is the only version that ever mattered.